Well, when I first was inspired to do it, I realized that I love talking to clients. I love helping people one-on-one, but I kept thinking there was more. And I kept coming across so many wonderful people that had so much to share that weren't getting big spotlights. I thought, I want to share all this information with way more people. I do like to talk also about things that I'm very passionate about, but I also have these guests that I want to highlight and give them a platform, and then the audience is going to also benefit. So my original thought was, hey, midlife women, we're dealing with emotional eating, dieting, diet culture, but there's so much more. There's mental health, there's relationships, there's physical health. There's, getting diagnosed with autoimmune and diabetes. And now we have a lot of new trending things that we can talk about as we go into season 2. I'm your host, Kim Hines, and welcome to the Emotional Eats podcast. I'm on a mission to show you that what you consume, not just the food, affects your entire life. Midlife is different. Let's dig into the real reasons why you eat when you're not hungry and why you're not feeling well. My guests and I are going to give you doable solutions and help you let go of perfectionism, food rules, and stress to make changes that will last a lifetime. If you're ready to ditch old school diet culture and nourish your entire life, this is the show for you. Welcome to episode 64 of the Emotional Eats podcast. Happy first birthday to the Emotional Eats podcast. You, the listeners, made this possible, and I want to say thank you. I have so much gratitude for you. When you share an episode, subscribe, write in a review, or give me feedback, it makes it even more possible to bring you more content and to also bring more expert guests to you. So thank you. This whole year has been because of you. My friend Janet Greer has been a friend of mine for over 30 years, and she joins me. She was the person who interviewed me on the trailer. So she's been in on Project Emotional Eats podcast since day one. She talks to me about what the highs and lows were of podcasting throughout the first year, and then what to expect in season 2. We also share a lot about our friendship. We do some laughing, especially at the beginning of the episode, and we share how important it is to have female friendships in your adult life and how we have helped each other through a lot. But also, we have fun common interests like true crime and reality TV, but we also share with you how we communicate with each other so we can stay in touch every single week, even though we don't live in the same state. So I look forward to hearing this particular episode because it's more fun, it's more candid, it's more about my experience this year. And I can't wait for you to help me out with season 2 also. So this is what you can do for me to help launch season 2 this week. If you could download 5 episodes, give me a review, subscribe to the podcast, give me any kind of feedback on social media. I could so appreciate it. Let me know, who would you like to have on the show? And if I can get them, I will get them. What topics do you want to hear about? And I appreciate you. Again, my gratitude goes out to you, the listeners, because you are making this possible. Enjoy the show. Hi, Janet. Welcome back to the Emotional Eats podcast. I'm excited. I'm so glad you're here.
I'm so happy to be here.
We were laughing about this before the podcast even started because Janet and I have this special relationship. She's in New York City and I am in St. Augustine, Florida. And I literally just said, I am afraid I'm going to talk over you because, Janet, how do we normally communicate?
I leave 15-minute voice memo messages. And you listen to them, and sometimes another 10-minute one and a 5-minute one after that. And you listen to them when you're walking or working out or driving or doing something else. I hope, because who would ever want to sit there and listen to that? And it's a big, long monologue. So we're not used to, in a really long time, give and take. So that's why we're talking at the same time.
It's hilarious. Yes, we give each other messages. And I think I've done a 14-minute one also recently.
I definitely do longer ones.
But I think we decided we're not going to apologize anymore because that's how we get to communicate. And this is really interesting. This is some research I was telling my kids that when you text someone, you just don't get the same amount of oxytocin as when you either see their face or hear their voice. So we are getting that feel good hormone by having our girlfriend conversations.
Definitely. I feel like I talk
Yes.
to you all the time in person. It's really weird. When we got on here today, it was like, hey, there you are. I talk to you every day. Isn't that funny?
Yes, it was like no time passes. And that's the thank goodness because we do talk every single week on our voice messages. We haven't seen each other since I came to New York to run the marathon.
Pre-COVID. No. One other
Wait.
time. I
Oh,
met.
that's right. I
Yes.
brought the family or
Yeah.
anybody who could come. I think we were missing one.
Yes.
And
I don't think Miles was there,
I don't
but
think
you.
Miles was there. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that was great because you showed us all around. And I have that great picture of us in Central Park with Scout, your
Yeah.
dog. We are dog lovers. That's another thing that we, in addition to, are talking about the shows that we watch, which when we communicate, we talk about our shows, but we talk about our dogs. And Scout the Aussie is your dog, and Pepper's
Yeah.
my dog. So we have
Pepper.
fun. Yes. So speaking of shows, part of our friendship is sharing our love of true crime. That's one of the shows.
I used to be embarrassed, but I'm not anymore because it's so popular. And I'm surprised how many people love it.
Well, we were just talking back and forth in those long messages about how women over 40 are obsessed with true crime, and husbands are very concerned about that, by the way.
Because it's
It's
usually the
always,
husband and wife doing the
yes,
crimes to each other in most of these.
exactly. And for some weird reason, we find it relaxing to watch.
I just am
So,
detached from it. It's almost like it's not real and it's a movie, but it's interesting. And
mhm.
I like to try to figure it out because of the mystery of it all. It is very sad that it's real, but there is something addictive about it. I can't lie.
I'm with you on the mystery part because I grew up. I was just telling Mike that I watched, I read Nancy Drew. And when I
Me
ran,
too.
yes.
I wasn't into the Hardy Boys, but I read every single Nancy Drew. I
Well,
have the
yes, I have the collection too. And I ran out of Nancy Drew. So I started reading Hardy Boys after that.
Oh, okay. I didn't get into that.
It's so funny. So the other thing, as girlfriends, and I think girlfriends are so important, and that's part of
Yeah.
why I'll explain why Janet is helping me with this today. But the other part of it is we love our reality shows. And I honestly didn't get into them a ton until we started watching the same ones and I had someone to talk to.
We were coincidentally watching the same ones, and we were
Yes.
coincidentally listening to the same murder shows,
Yes,
right?
exactly. And there are a ton of women over 40 and over 50 watching, still watching Housewives. I only watched one. And I do love to talk about that because, it's just interesting watching people. And I know that it must be interesting in reality show to know that there's cameras as your life is going on. But we
I think
talk
they
about
get
that.
used to them. I think because it's all the time, after a while, it's just, they're probably not thinking about it so much anymore.
I think
Do
that happens to me even podcasting. Like I'll forget that I'm on camera and that I have
Yes.
the microphone. We're just having a conversation. And then the big one though that surprised me how many women in our age range watched Vanderpump Rules
Oh, yeah.
also. Yeah.
But did they watch it like we did from the beginning? Because we used to
I
work in
don't think
restaurants.
so.
And that's why we were drawn to it back the first few episodes years ago, 12, 14 years ago, because it reminded us of our time in our 20s working in restaurants. It was just like, I know this. This is exactly what happened. Everyone dated each other. People were having all this drama.
It's so true. And there's something about the restaurant life. There's like a family aspect to it, and everybody gets to know each other. And yes, and speaking of that, that kind of leads really well into around the time frame that you and I met. So we met what, 30 years ago plus?
We met, it was definitely around 1993 or
Some
4.
Yeah, somewhere in that area.
So that's
We were
30.
we were in our 20s, so we won't name our actual ages, but
I was 15.
I was 10. No, but we met at a party
Yeah.
And our friends, I was brought there, I believe, by Ray and Suda. We'll give them a little shout out.
Yeah. We don't went
And
to high school together.
yes, and fun, great people. And it's funny when you go to a party in your 20s, you're like thinking, I think I used to think maybe I'll meet a guy, whatever. Well, I met Janet and we
We
picked each other up.
excuse me, yes, we did.
We exchanged phone numbers
Talked the
and
whole like an hour too.
yeah,
I mean, we talked the whole time.
and
Remember?
yes, and ever since then, we have been just friends and just has always have so much to talk
Oh,
about.
we've been through a lot together. I mean, we might have lost a little bit of touch there for a few years here or there, but not really. I mean, I always knew you were out there, and now we're just talking all the time, which is great because you're just.
Yes.
I learned so much from you way before you had the podcast, just about so many things. Kim knows that I don't do math, and she's brilliant at math, but I learned we don't talk about math, but just about especially nutrition and health and healthy lifestyle.
Well, I appreciate that. And you've always given me such good perspective, all those things that we've gone through together. I've always gotten such a healthy and solid perspective from you that I have incorporated into, all the things that I've been through. You've been the most solid friend. And I think one thing that I found interesting is when we did kind of fall apart from each other for a little while, like a lot of
Nothing.
long-term friendships too. It was
Yeah.
just life. And it was usually when I also was going through something really hard. And I realize I need to be connected to people like you and friends and girlfriends when those things are going on, because when we go through them in isolation, it's 10 times worse.
And don't put it on you because I'm sure that it was also me, but it was never any kind of negative between us. It's just people do lose touch, and I'm so glad. And it wasn't for a long time, but I'm so glad years back that we, got reconnected because you are one of my best friends and I just find you very inspirational. I do.
Thank you. And you are one of my most non-judgmental friends, and I really appreciate that. It's really interesting too, as you were talking about the math and the health and wellness. I am so in awe of you being an actor because it's a world that I don't get, I don't understand. And when you tell me things and the projects you're doing, and it's just fun. It's just really exciting to kind of get the inside view from you
With
on
all
what's going on.
interest in other people. And it's a real interest. You're not acting, I can tell. And I'm always like, gosh, she really cares and is interested in this. But a job of an actor is auditioning. So it's rejection 90% of the time. But it's as long as you accept that and know that's the job, getting it is sort of the frosting and the icing on the cake. It's the auditioning that continues to make you better. And that's when you have an opportunity to act, when you're auditioning, when you're learning a role for an audition. And then every once in a while you get the part and then you're acting as well. But people think the auditioning isn't part of it. It is the acting. It is the job. Isn't that funny?
Yes, and I don't think people understand it doesn't just come to you. There's thousands of auditions before that one comes along.
Thousands of competition. There's so much
Yeah.
competition. You can't take it personally. You just do the best you can do. Well, speaking of that, I just want to say that your podcast I mean, there are a lot of podcasts out there, and I think yours is one of the best. I've listened to many, many. I can't say I've listened to all of them, but my goal is to listen to all of them. You've done 70. Am I right?
I recorded 70 as of the today when we're recording. 61 of them are live. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I have a little catching up to do, but I've learned so much. They're so varied. You're so real. You're so, it's approachable, but just the guests that you've had on are so great. And what inspired you to start the podcast in the first place?
Thank you. I appreciate this. So, just to give a quick backstory before I talk about the inspiration, the reason why Janet is with me today and has been was the beginning of the podcast. She's always been my supporter, literally. Like when I first broke into health and wellness and I was leaving teaching, she always you bought products, you supported me, you commented on posts, you always did amazing things for me. And I thought, this is the person I want on this journey. So when we recorded the trailer to introduce the podcast, I wanted Janet in on the whole thing. So that's why she's back today, because the first season, I've done over a year and I can't even believe it.
Congratulations.
Um, Thank you. Thank you.
Gree.
Well, when I first was inspired to do it, I realized that I love talking to clients. I love helping people one on one, but I kept thinking there was more. And I kept coming across so many wonderful people that had so much to share that weren't getting big spotlights. I thought, I want to share all this information with way more people. I do like to talk also about things that I'm very passionate about, but I also have these guests that I want to highlight and give them a platform, and then the audience is going to also benefit. So my original thought was, hey, midlife women, we're dealing with emotional eating, dieting, diet culture, but there's so much more. There's mental health, there's relationships, there's physical health, there's, getting diagnosed with autoimmune and diabetes. And now we have a lot of new trending things that we can talk about as we go into season 2. But I was inspired by the fact that people were asking more and more questions, and I didn't always have the answers. So I thought, I'll go find those people. If I can't do the podcast, I'm going to find somebody who can.
I love that because everything's so based in fact, and it's not just some fad. You find the best in each area, or some of the best. I know there are a lot of experts out there, but you find really good people that can really also talk about it, because it's one thing to know it and another thing to really to talk about it and teach it and make it interesting. So I love that about the podcast. I really do.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very blessed. I've been in circles of people that know a lot, and it's just nobody's ever said no, I don't want to come on the podcast. Except I take that back. I will throw this out there. I do some very far reaching trying to get certain guests on, and some of them have become so big that they do have to make their choices based on downloads. So that's how everyone out there can help me, is just keep downloading, because then I can get the best of the best for you.
I have to remember to do that. Downloading is key. If you're listening to it, download it. Okay. Thank you for reminding.
Yes.
It sounds like, I know it's changed. It's always been good,
Mm.
but I've heard an evolution just in like the sound of it always sounded good, but it started to sound more clear. You started getting, all the guests are great, but even more varied guests. How would you say that it's changed for you or evolved since the start a year ago?
Well, personally, it has evolved because I think interviewing is really interesting. You think you're just going to ask these questions and the answer is going to come out. And I didn't realize how on my toes I needed to be, because sometimes people won't stay on track, but it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. We can really go down different rabbit holes. And I had to put my expectations back in the box, because sometimes a podcast would come out great, but it didn't go in the direction I wanted to. In fact, if you do listen to the podcast, you will see that there are a couple of people that I invite back
Yeah.
because I didn't get everything out of them that I wanted to, but it doesn't mean the first episode wasn't great. I also am allowing myself to dig deeper, to stop and park it on a certain topic and dig a little bit deeper. Because when I first started, it was a little bit nerve wracking. You're getting online, sometimes with people you've never met in person, and you're just getting ready to give them a bunch of questions and, find out what they know. But is there a personality? Is there a chemistry? Is there, there's so many times people will get in touch with me. I've been very blessed. So I'll tell you one thing that's changed is, after being out there for about 6 months, I'm getting people coming to me. Can you put
Great.
this
I
person?
love that.
Yes.
That's
Yeah. People are coming to me. I don't ever lack for guests. I have to actually say no sometimes, because, and I don't mean this in a critical way, but I will not interview somebody that I don't think is fantastic for my audience, has some kind of inspiration, has the energy. I mean, we need the energy to learn. Sometimes we have to have that uplifting, encouraging feel. So that's how a lot of it has changed, but I'm getting better and I'm not great,
Oh,
but
I
I
think it's
feel,
great. But
oh, thank you.
I thought you were great from the beginning, but and I know, I hope I've told you this, but you really have grown. You're great at asking questions, and you ask the questions that I have. And I'm like, that's what I wanted to know. That's what I wanted to know. You're a really good listener. And I like the way that you probably have a plan for it, but you're flexible in going in whatever direction you have to, because you can't control the other person, right?
No, thank you so much. And what I've learned is when somebody's on a roll, that's sometimes when the magic is happening. So I'm just learning to let that go. And if we have to, we just come back in and do a part two. But thank you. I appreciate that because I'm learning as I go and I am loving it more. I will be really honest that the thing that I've learned this past year is I really need more help in processing the podcast because my love is getting online with everybody and having these conversations. My love is not processing it. And I do want to give a shout out to two people. One is Omar Cumberbatch. He actually is on my podcast
Great.
twice. Yeah, he's amazing. He did a sugar craving episode, but then he also did health advocacy.
Yeah,
But he
I
is
remember the name and I remember his first one. Yeah.
Yes. And he
Right.
has a great, actually quit sugar program that you can go through. I also, Omar is basically the one who said, you can do this. And he had a course and he basically mentored me through getting the podcast up and running. And I got it up and running in just a few months. The other
Wonderful.
person I will shout out, thank you to Scott Donnell. He is my editor. And if it weren't for him, there would be a lot of things in here. Plus, the sound wouldn't be so great. And he just puts all the music and the intro and everything together and is so flexible with me. So it's the team. And then I'll be adding to the team in probably later in the year. I'll be adding to the team so that I can really enjoy the recording process and get more out.
That's wonderful. I am wondering about listeners because I know you have your guests and we hear that, but what do you hear from listeners? Or has there been anything motivating or surprising from any listener that really stands out for you?
Yes, it's really interesting because I have different types of listeners. Some listeners really like the science and they like the straightforward information coming from, especially like the doctors. I have a couple doctors that have come on and that's one type of listener, and they're just so excited to learn about, like perimenopause. They want to know more about what's happening with their estrogen and progesterone. So that's one. And I get some really neat comments like, hey, I hope you have that person back. And they'll even give me questions. But the second type of listener is, oh, this is so heartwarming to me. They're more emotional. And I've gotten some beautiful comments about some of the solo podcasts I've done around emotional eating and stress eating. And they are just sharing their story and they're thanking me for sharing my story because I don't have a pretty past with food. I don't have a pretty past with dieting or binge eating. So when I share that, that's usually what I get is some gratitude. And one episode in particular that was amazing with Michael Krug, he talks about his full on food addiction and how he worked his way out of that. And I got the most amazing emotional comments around that, just saying, wow, I just needed to hear that I wasn't the only one that had to work my way out of that food addiction. So those touched my heart and they really choked me up because, a lot of my listeners are me.
Well, that's what's so great about it is that you're so honest and you share your story and so that people don't feel shame, right? And that they can share theirs. And we all have something. It may be not eating, it may be something else, but everyone struggled with something and you make it okay because you bring people sort of out of the shadows and allow them to be who they are and say, hey, I have this problem too. And I hear that all over your podcast. So thank you for always being so honest and raw and sharing your your struggles in the past.
Thank you. Thank you. It makes it worth it.
It has to be rewarding, Kim. We that's a lot of the good stuff. And I know it's mainly good, but what are the biggest challenges that you have?
So I think the biggest challenges are just I'm going to be really raw and honest here is sometimes I have that imposter syndrome, especially when I put on a solo. I have a great idea and my solos come from personal experience. My solos come from client conversations. They're not just out of nowhere. And I don't ever have spots that I have to fill where I feel like I have to record because I'm behind on podcasts or something. That's never an issue for me. But what I do feel like is that imposter syndrome. So that's why I do tell my story and I tell the client story because then it is what it is. It's just authentic. But I have to step over that threshold into the room of being just me and not worrying about it. Because again, I'm here to give, I'm here to share. But like I said, the other downside has been the processing. I all of you podcasters out there who started off doing it by yourself without help, and you are doing your show notes and you're doing your cover art and you're posting it all over the place and you're posting and promoting your guests, power to you. Don't quit and just keep doing it until you can afford to hire somebody because I think that's the hardest part. But I want to tell the benefit of that hard part is I get to hear back every episode. I get to pick the clip, and there's always a clip that hits me, so I get to read about it again. So it just keeps not only, instilling that I love doing this, but it also I relearn things that I heard in the podcast episode because by repetition we all learn. And because to be honest, I love so many podcasts out there that's why I don't always listen to my own again when it's live because I've already heard it a number of times. I want everybody else to listen to it and download it, but I have already heard it and I want to hear other people and what they're doing. The other downside, I think, is there's so many people that I want on this podcast, and there's almost just not enough time to put everybody in.
But that's a good problem.
Yes, it is a good problem to have. So that was a good question because we don't really talk about the hard parts of it. Everybody just gets the recording and thinks that's it. It's kind of like when we were talking about auditions and acting. You hear the end piece of it and you don't realize that there's, a few hours of work, not including the actual interview involved.
Yeah, there is a lot. There is a lot that we can have as a parallel there. There's just a lot of behind the scenes and a lot of work that we don't see. Actually, probably more than what we see. We talked a lot about our friendship in the beginning, and and listening to your podcast, you obviously have women and men on. Anyone, women, men at different ages can listen to your show, but you do focus a lot, would you say, on perimenopause, menopause, and what women are going through, emotional eating. That's a big theme. How do your women friendships sort of inform what you're talking about? How does it help? And do you think it's a big part of health as well to have women friendships?
Absolutely. And that's why I loved our conversation at the beginning in our relationship because it helps so much. We know that relationships are one of the top things that keep people not only living longer, but living a better quality of life for the rest of their life. Those relationships are really important. And women have this special, unique thing that I don't think all men have. I think some men have some close male friends that they can talk to, and they just talk in a different way. Women have this beautiful ability of just opening up, being vulnerable. And when you find your tribe, it doesn't have to be more than 1 to 3 people. And those are the people that you can share with, that you're safe with. And it's the same way with emotional eating and treating our bodies and dieting. We want to be safe and our bodies want to be safe no matter what we're doing. So that's why, when we bring in all these things that people are dealing with in this age range, women specifically, over dieting for 30 years, terrible body image, perimenopause just throws everything. You just feel like you got run over by a bus and you're trying to emotionally, physically, and mentally keep it together. And then you're dealing with body changes. Girlfriends are like the place. And I'm not saying we have to be super negative and be like, oh, yeah, I hate my midsection. But some days you need to tell somebody how you're feeling, and that person can kind of say, hey, it's okay. This is what we're going through. It's going to be okay. We're going to work it out. You'll find the answers. And in addition to you, I also have a health coach friend that I'm very blessed to be able to she's right here in town. I'll just throw some things her way. I'll give her a shout out, Melissa Slump. She's been on my podcast twice also, and I've been on hers.
Wonderful.
Yeah, we just really need to have that friendship to be able to bounce it off of. And holding things in, we all know that when we hold things in, it manifests in some way. And emotional eating, drinking alcohol, maybe having a little rage moment, it all manifests itself in some interesting way. So we want to make sure we're able to get those emotions out.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Is that one of the things that helps motivate you to keep producing and doing this podcast, is not just the feedback you get from people, but maybe what you're learning, and what you're one thing that you learned was obviously that friendships are part of an overall healthy lifestyle. So you're applying what you're learning regularly to on your podcast to your life?
Oh my gosh, that is such a wonderful question. Yes, I learned so many things. So I had some incredible people come in and talk about perimenopause. I thought I knew a lot just because of what I've learned in courses, what I've learned through my body going through it. And I had some, if I went back and listed them, I probably had 50 symptoms in perimenopause, but I didn't know at the time. So, people, it's funny. I have a couple people that I think of. Ren Jones, which sounds weird. He's a man, but he has taken menopause courses and he has made it a point to learn all about menopause for the women that he helps. Amanda Thebe is an amazing advocate for perimenopause. And Dana Lawson came on. She's a health coach friend, and Dr. J. But through all of these episodes, oh my gosh, Stephanie Fusnick-Craftsweller, I can't leave her out either because she's amazing. When you look at what's really happening to the body, these people can explain it so well, and getting to hear it 4 to 5 times. So, I thought maybe I'm having too many perimenopause episodes on here, but I heard it in different ways every time. And so I did take all that information. I can use it with my clients too. And when I have a diabetes or blood sugar, insulin sensitivity podcast with Melissa, I can take that information back and I can use that for myself and for my clients.
That's
Different
great.
those are different, those are just different exammples. I am really excited too
Well, I
because
probably love them all, but these are some of your favorites.
yes,
What do you
when I decided to quit alcohol about 2.5 years ago, you've been with me on this journey forever of I've really probably always wanted to quit since I was 30, but it took me until just a couple years ago. Two of my favorite podcasts that really helped me with that. The first one was with Deb Podlager. She's the mocktail mom, and she was
that
so
I
inspiring. Yes, I know you listened to that one. And she really kind of talked about that mommy wine culture. And I was even a part of she had a group, for alcohol-free individuals. And the other person that I had met even before that, but I ended up having her on the podcast, and I'm actually going to be on hers next week, is Katie Campbell, Mindful Constitution. She is a sober curious coach. And
oh,
so, yeah, so that I personally took in all this information. So when you hear some of these podcasts, if you're using it, just know I am too.
that's great. Now I know that you're probably just a sponge with everything you're learning, and different people might be talking about the same subject, but things hit you a different way, or you're hearing it in a different way. And I found that in your podcast. It's some of the subjects are very different, some align, but nothing's the same. No podcast is really like any other podcast. It's a nice library of podcasts to have if you listen to your Emotional Eats podcast. So season 2 is starting, and I wanted to ask you if you have any. Well, I know you because I happen to know Kim's a perfectionist. Um, that's just a fact, everyone. What are some of your goals for season 2? Starting.
Yes. Oh, season 2 is going to be starting right as we are kicking off this podcast to introduce it. Season 2, I would love to be getting a little bit deeper into some subjects. And I have a couple of people coming back from season 1. And right before actually this one comes out, we will have had Dr. J for a second time because in addition to perimenopause, he overlaps from episode 31 that he was in, and I think he'll be here in the 60s. episode 60s. He, I don't know how old he is, but he is not only touching him on that, but we're adding on. And so I'm bringing in things that I've never talked about, like a little bit about autoimmune, endometriosis, PCOS. And again, bringing in every time I bring people in, I love to hear their perspective on nutrition when they're, especially if they're a doctor, and he's a functional medicine doctor. So that's coming up. But you know what the trend is right now is the weight loss drugs. So
Uh,
I'm actually bringing back, and here's the thing with the loss drugs. I'm going to be really, really honest right now. When I first started hearing about them, knowing that they were for diabetes originally, the first thought that so many people thought was, oh my gosh, this is such a, it's a quick fix, it's a cheat, it's like taking a diet pill. And, the more I've learned about it because of the podcast, the more I've learned about it because of so many people that I've met thanks to the podcast, I'm learning more and more ways on how it can be used appropriately to really help people who really cannot get a jump start on their A1C, coming down on their blood sugar and therefore weight, because we do know that there is that correlation with the weight that is causing people to have so much visceral fat, which is dangerous. We know that insulin is so key, how we have the insulin sensitivity in our bodies. So Dr. Eric Fate, we're actually going to record that tonight. We're going to talk about the 5 mistakes that people are making so that we can help people who have, when we go forward with this, there's no judgment on the weight loss drugs, but we want to start helping people who have chosen to go on them or are choosing to go on them because it is so popular. And I think we need to make sure that we are serving people. But also in season 2, I want to get a little deeper into, I have an intimacy and sex expert
oh,
therapist
wow.
coming on. Yeah, I'm really excited to have her on because we're talking about relationships in midlife and sex and intimacy. And that'll even tie into emotional eating a little bit and body image because we're just digging a little bit deeper. I've actually interviewed my kids. They're going to be at the beginning of season
Oh,
2.
that's great.
Yes, Peter and Alex agreed to talk about how they grew up with food, the thoughts that they had. They even talk about how they felt when I became a health coach, what it was like eating in the 2 households because they would go back to their
Right.
dads. And they even talk a little bit, they even have a couple of tips for stress relief. And it's funny because they may only be in their 20s, but they're pretty wise on
Big
their.
Mom,
Aw, thanks.
always so involved. And so, I can't wait to listen to that one. I'm going to have
That
to jump
one's
through some of the
yes.
episodes to listen to that.
It's really funny,
That's
actually. So
wonderful.
yeah, so season 2 is gonna be just, I'm just going a little deeper, and I'm feeling more comfortable with myself as an interviewer, and also knowing that, again, people can come back if we go down a certain road, it means somebody needs to hear it. It's meant to be.
I know how much you're a coach in every way. I remember when you were a math teacher and tutoring your kids, and of course, your own children, tutoring your math students, and of course, your own children. And so I'm guessing now that you're a pro at this, do people come to you for advice on podcasts, or do you have any advice for people trying to start a podcast of any kind?
Yes, that is a great question. I've had a couple people ask me how to get started. And the one thing that I always say, because it's so funny, you nailed it. I'm a perfectionist. It doesn't mean I do things perfectly or right, but I do have that problem of all or nothing. It's all or nothing. It's food, it's work, it's whatever. But I always say I never thought I'd get to this place, but done over perfect. Because if you don't just start, and literally what you can do is if you're not even ready to put it on camera or put it out in audio, do this. Get on a Zoom and just record with people. And then you have them in the bank and you can figure it out as you go. But I'm always here for people who want to get started. And again, Omar's class was amazing. And we had some other friends that he and I know mutually, some other coaches and other experts that are in that class that talk about it. And, you worry too much. And in general, I think life, I say you meaning everybody, I worry too much about what's going to happen in the next day, next week, next month? What can you do today? What's your first step? And your first step is just figure out, what do you want to do? What kind of podcast do you want to do? What kind of information do you want to present? And you know what? This is agonizing because it does change. Your mind changes over time. You can rebrand your podcast, and I will probably do that at some point. And you also can not put an episode out if it didn't go well. You can also
Or no,
edit
I,
it.
you're in charge.
Yes, you're in charge. I love that. And thank you. I was talking over you again, by the way, I think is why I didn't hear you. You're in charge. You get to do whatever you want. I have not, n- I, I almost said a double negative. I have not put an episode up yet because there's always a little nugget in there. But I reserve the right, if things are not going well, to not put it up because it is my name that's on it. And the other thing that's really funny about the podcast is when I talk to people and they say, this is the thing I'm having a struggle with. It's so much fun to be able to go and just grab the link and send it and be like, hey, listen to this and then let me know what you think. We can get together and talk about it. It has improved my coaching because I have even more resources. In fact, this is so funny. I had a client. Most people know that online I work with women over 40. But in the office in St. Augustine, I also have male clients. And one of them was asking a question about seed oils, which is a whole nother story, the funniness of that podcast. But
Oh, I want to hear about that real
yes,
quick.
I will tell you that story. But he said, do you have any information on this? Because I keep hearing I shouldn't have this. And I said, oh, yeah, I have a podcast for you. So I sent him the podcast and I didn't even think about it. It was the podcast I recorded with Dr. Kate Shanahan. And he wrote me back 10 minutes later and he's like, oh my goodness, that's you. He had no idea I even had a podcast, but it was nice to have that resource for him.
That's great.
Yes. But I will tell you, this is one of the things that happened to me. And if you're going to start a podcast, this is something to think about. You have to let go of comments, trolls, anything. You cannot live in the comment section except for the positivity and answering questions for your audience and the people and your listeners and the people that you care about. Because when I put out the podcast with Dr. Kate Shanahan on seed oils and how the negative effect that it has on our body, she also had some conversation in there about the American Heart Association. You'll have to go back and listen to that to see what she was saying. But it was a little bit controversial. And I had some bots. And I believe that what happens is they have bots that go after certain people. Kate is actually a big name. She's written 2 books that I've read, Deep Nutrition, and I think it's The Fat Burn Fix. I hope I quoted that correctly. But she has 2 books, and she's well known in this space. And she's well known enough that when she makes her opinion known, there are these automatic, I think they're bots or people who are paid to just go after these, they look her stuff up. And so I still get, every once in a while, I still get a bunch of people who will comment on that particular podcast, mostly good, but those bad ones. But it terrified me at first because I wasn't used to that. And it happened to me on all platforms. And I almost, because I supposedly was putting misinformation out, I almost got pulled off of the platform that is not Instagram, but like Instagram. So, and I almost got pulled off twice because I also mentioned weight loss drugs by name, even though everybody wants to know about them. I almost got pulled off that platform too. So be strong, do what you need to do, and then just learn how to play by the rules on how to communicate it.
That's great. It's funny. I listened to a couple other little bite-sized podcasts. Yours is my favorite, and they're not anything to do with health and nutrition. And I noticed that first of all, there are a ton of ads. Starts with a ton of ads. There's a ton of ads in the middle. There are a ton of ads at the end. The good news is you can fast forward through them. I think everyone's figured that out. But anyway, but the podcast itself is about 8 minutes, maybe 7 minutes. It's so short. And I guess they're not educational ones, they're more fun ones, so it doesn't matter. But yours are usually about how long, because I feel like they're the right length. But 8 minutes seems like not much. It's almost like 8 minutes of ads and 8 minutes of podcast.
This is a Kim opinion. Doesn't mean this is what's really happening. but I almost feel like it is to get the ad out there because a lot of podcasters make their money on being sponsored with those ads. And that 8 minutes is, there's no work involved. You're not even getting an hourly rate on that one. You're just getting 8 minutes and then you can get all the ads in there. And it just keeps you, I think the other thing is we want to be consistent. Like I don't want to drop out. I've never missed a Monday since I started on May 5th or 8th of last year. And
Wow.
yeah, thank
Congratulations.
you. Thank you. I always try to stay ahead because like I said, I don't have trouble getting people in. It's just the processing. But the ad thing is very interesting. So I haven't gotten to a point where am sponsored and I have not looked for sponsorship. I have wanted to establish the podcast first. And it goes by downloads. You won't be able to get ads unless you have a certain number of downloads.
Anyone that
And
this, and I have to be better too. Download
thank
it.
you. Everybody download. So, and as we go into season 2, you really can help me out by downloading like 5 of them just to kind of get this kick started. But I love to settle somewhere around 45 minutes. I think what's a struggle though is we get going and we have such a great conversation. Mine sometimes go up to an hour. My solo ones, because I'm not going back and forth with someone, are anywhere from 30 minutes to 45 minutes. I haven't stuck to any particular time because if there is something more to say, I want to bring it up. And people, if they are like me, I just pick up the podcast where I left off when I get back in the car or when I'm walking or um, it doesn't bother me to have a podcast that is 2 hours long. If anybody has listened to Andrew Huberman, for example, you have hour and a half to 2 hour podcast because there's so much information and it's good stuff. And I just keep coming back to it.
And you can
So
always stop,
yeah.
like you stop and continue. Stop.
Exactly. And exactly. If it's going to go longer than an hour, I really evaluate if we have to do a part 2. That's where some of my part 2s have come from. Like with Dr. J, he's coming back because I didn't get to all of my questions, which was great because he did a thorough job of helping us really talk about perimenopause, like I mentioned before.
Yeah, that's great to have someone come back because there's just so much good information and they're so good. Well, I just had to mention that because it's funny. Some of the podcasts are every single day, and it's like 8 minutes every day, and they're basically just someone throwing out their thoughts for the day, and then all these ads. So it's just fluff. Whereas yours is it's fun because you're so likable and you bring on varied guests, but you're going to come away from it really learning something valuable.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that because that's what I want is it's just all about sharing and putting that information out there. I would love to be able to put out more than one a week because I have that much information. And as you know, I have that much to say. And it may not all just be about health and wellness, but I think that there's so much out there. When I tell people I have a podcast, the number one thing that people say is there's so many podcasts out there, but it's a beautiful thing. This is not competitive. It's what you're interested in, what you want to hear about. And if you listen to this podcast, it's because you're meant to be here. You're part of the tribe. And if you listen to other podcasts, that's okay. That's what you're really interested in at the time. So I don't feel like there's any competition out there. I feel like it's all love. And it's funny because even, you listen to mine, which I really appreciate. Sometimes my kids will, I'll send it to them and just ask them to, check it out because it might be something that they can use. But I also, my friend Melissa, who I told you about, shout out to her. She has a type 1 diabetes and midlife podcast, and we listen to each other's, we support each other through it. So it's whatever you love. And hopefully you're here and just love the information, which by the way, if you're listening, you have questions, you can just reach out to me and say like, do a podcast on this, please. This is something I really need to know more about.
And how do people reach out? Because is that something on the actual, I know that you can put comments right on the app. on
Yes.
the
Well, I do put in the show notes the different ways to reach me. And I have a podcast web page also. So you can go to Apple, Spotify, you can go to the podcast web page. And if you want to talk to me directly, you can do that either through the website, but I really highly recommend at Kim Hines Health on Instagram. And I mention that a lot in the podcast because that is just a nice way to go back and forth until we get to know each other and I can find other ways to communicate with you. I do have every once in a while I'll throw out in my stories too, like questions. I'll tell people, hey, I'm going to interview this person. What questions do you have? And I just had a couple people respond to the one for Niquan Lewis, who's going to come on and talk about relationship, sex, intimacy, and midlife. I got some great questions for
oh,
that
cool.
one.
That's
Yeah.
to pre-plan. And I also like your polls that you do. You're on your polls, right? Yes, no.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah,
Just
I
finding
like.
out what people want to know about, what's important to them. And I appreciate that.
It
And
sounds like Tribe has really grown. You mentioned Tribe. It sounds like it's really
yeah,
grown with all the different guests. In a way, they're part of a tribe too, because they're people that you can look to for answers when you have a specific question about something. And then I'm just sure you've just met so many people through both listeners, guests you've had on. So it sounds like in season one, your tribe has really grown.
oh my gosh. I think that's one of my favorite things. And I'm so glad you brought that up because I didn't bring that up earlier. I have the most amazing, and I know it sounds weird, internet network connection, but I have so many coaches and doctors. In fact, one doctor, I won't go into it too far, but I even connected him with my husband, Mike, over some sleep situations. But it was really amazing because I was like, hey, I know enough about this person now through the podcast that I can actually bring him into our personal circle because I knew he could help. And actually, I'm just going to throw that. I have actually said that in a podcast. So I can say it's Dr. Eric Fate, who's going to be on again. And there's other people that I now can just check in with and be like, "Hey, how you doing? What's new? How have you been?" We comment on each other's posts. We're connected, and this is what the world's about. We are all connected in some way. We are not separate. We are all one. We all have very similar deep down things that we're dealing with, and that is why I love this. There's nothing bad about us getting more and more connected to people in the world.
Well, you're great at making connections. Your interviews are wonderful. You're really helping people so much with your podcast. I can't wait to listen to the ones I haven't listened to yet. And is there anything else that you want to add as you kind of close out season? Well, you do. You closed out season 1 and 2 is about to start. When does it start?
It's going to be the next episode after this
Okay.
one. So this is our intro to it. And yeah, the only thing I want to say is this is such a passion project and I love it. And if I almost feel like I am overly blessed with the job that I do because people always say, find the job that you would do for free. And I am living that life. So I'm so thankful. And the funny thing is I would coach forever. If I want to, I'll coach. I have no end date on this. But one thing I did tell Mike is I said the one thing I think I want to keep going with, even if I ever retire, is the podcast is just too much fun. Like there's no downside to that. And in addition to helping the audience and those of you who are listening, this is for you. This podcast is for you. It's for you to feel included, to feel uplifted, to get information and to be an advocate for yourself because I want you to also be able to ask the right questions when you go to the doctor. But for those of you who may be guests in the future, have been guests in the past, this is for you too, because I want to highlight you. I want to show you to the world because there's enough people to be helped. There's no competition when we lift each other up. And Janet, I want to thank you because you've always been a part of all of my projects.
Well,
And I appreciate you.
I appreciate you. I'm so proud of you, really, Kim. I'm honored. I really am honored to be your friend. And I'm so proud of everything you do. You do 100%. And your first season was so successful and you continue to grow. I can't wait for your second one. And I just want to, again, congratulate you on your first and say absolute best of luck. You don't need luck, but all my best with your season 2. It's very exciting.
Thank you. Appreciate you so much. And Janet, can you tell everyone where you are on Instagram so they can find you?
Yes, I'm not great about this stuff. I guess I should promote, but I'm Janet Greer actor. I do theater, I do film, I do TV. I stopped for many years and then got back into it just before COVID. Perfect timing when there were no jobs. So it's really just been the last couple of years. It's been really fun, but it's Janet Greer actor. Thank you, Kim. Thank you
I
so much.
love it. And thank you for your friendship. I appreciate you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Talk later. I'll leave you a long message later.
Looking forward to it. That's it. Thank you so much for tuning into the Emotional Eats podcast, the podcast that's here to help you feel amazing, strong, energetic, and healthy holistically in your mind and your body. But my guest and I also want to help you build great habits to help you with long-term mental and physical health so that you can lean into aging in a very positive and strong way. Check out my website, kimhines.com, and please come see me on Instagram at kimhineshealth. That's where I leave tips for healthy life, healthy body, healthy relationship with food, and I also am there to encourage you, and I love to hear from you. So tag me and let me know what you like about the show and what you want to hear more about. Check out the show notes for all the details. Make sure to rate and review the podcast. And until our next time together, nourish your entire life and give yourself grace today.